Welcome to Aquarium Know-How. My name's Thomas, and in the last video we discussed all the equipment and how to set up a brand new aquarium. In this video we're going to be talking about adding fish. So I went to the pet store. I got 10 gold white cloud minnows. They were out of the regular ones. I'll put those in the tank for now and I'll explain what I'm doing here shortly, but before we go into adding the fish, I want to talk about choosing the right fish. There's a few things to consider and some verbiage to know before you go to the pet store to get some fish for your aquarium. So depending on which fish you choose, you'll have bottom-dwelling fish, mid-level swimmers, and top-level swimmers. So we'll start at the top and the mid kind of at the same time. There's not a whole lot of dedicated top-dwelling fish. There are some, like your hatchet fish, gouramis, killifish, upside down catfish, and there's a few others. But even a lot of your top-dwelling fish are going to drift into the mid-level as well, and some of the ones that go in the mid-level are going to be swimming up at the top also. So mid and top-level fish are pretty much one and the same, save for a few specific examples which are dedicated to stay right at the top. So most of the fish that you're going to be looking at the fish store are going to be mid-level swimmers. Those are the ones that are more common, most widely available, and most popular. For example, a lot of the tetras, the barbs, angelfish, goldfish, most of your fish are going to be mid to top level swimmers. Bottom dwellers are going to be a lot of your catfish, the cory cats, the plecostomus, bushy-nosed plecostomus, or bristle-nosed plecostomus, some of your ram cichlids. And then most of those bottom-dwelling fish are going to be your cleanup crew, as they say. They're going to pick up any food that the top and mid-level swimmers don't get to. So they're good to have at least a few bottom dwellers to pick up the leftovers. The other way fish are grouped are by their behavior or their temperament. The first off being community fish. Community fish are generally non-aggressive. They get well with a lot of other different kinds of fish. Usually a lot of the schooling fish like the tetras and barbs, mollies, platies, which leads us into semi-aggressive, which barbs and some of the angelfish can fall into that category. Semi-aggressive basically means that they can go with other fish, but they can also be a little bit aggressive. They can nip at slower moving fish's fins. They can pick on other fish in certain situations. So it's kind of one of those things you have to go through a little bit of trial and error, do a little bit of research and see what other people have done or what success they've had mixing those kinds of fish together. The next grouping of fish is aggressive. Aggressive fish are going to be a lot of your African cichlids, fish like Oscars and betas. They can all be pretty aggressive, and of course any kind of predatory fish. So depending on which kind of fish you want to keep, it's going to dictate what kind of tank mates you can keep with those fish. A lot of times when you get into the more aggressive fish, you keep a species only tank where you just have that one species in there, or in some cases like with Oscars, you just have one fish in there. And Oscars tend to get pretty big and they're very friendly, so a lot of times you'll have a tank that just has one fish, or they call it like a pet fish. Some other things to consider with fish is the size of the fish. Most fish you find at the pet store are going to be really small when you see them, but they may get really big, sometimes up to a foot or more. So make sure you know about the fish you're going to get before you purchase it, and make sure that your aquarium is big enough to house it. Another thing to consider is whether or not the fish is a schooling fish. I would say generally with a schooling fish you want 6 or more. A lot of people will tell you 3 or 4 is minimum. I tend to find they do a lot better in larger groups. If you see these fish in the wild, they'll be in groups of hundreds and hundreds of them, and they'll act more natural if you have a lot of them in a school together. A lot of times having a larger school will allow you to keep those fish with other tank mates, such as the case with barbs. Barbs kept in small numbers can tend to be more aggressive than if you keep them with a larger group. So if you want to keep barbs with other fish, keep a larger group of them, and then they'll be less likely to nip at the fins of other fish or be picking on them too much. You might also want to do some research on the time of day that your fish are going to be active. If you have a nocturnal fish, you're never going to see them. They're going to be hiding all day long, and once you turn the lights out and go to bed, then they'll come out. And then in the morning, they'll go right back to hiding. You'll never see them. I remember once I had a bumblebee catfish and thought it was really cool looking at the store and brought him home. And I saw him like once a month when I would do pretty deep clean on the aquarium. He was always hiding under a log or behind something and would never come out, even during feeding. That's another thing with feeding nocturnal fish or fish that are on the bottom, is you have to sometimes pay a little bit more attention to feeding them, because they're not going to get to the food before the top and mid-level swimmers do. And if they've eaten all the food by the time the lights go off, then that let's say the bumblebee catfish comes out, there's not going to be any food for him to eat. And the last major consideration is your water parameters. Different fish from different parts of the world are going to require different water parameters. Generally speaking, if your fish are from South America, they're going to want softer, more acidic water, which means a lower pH. Whereas African fish are going to want more of a harder alkaline water that has a higher pH level. A lot of times you can mix different species from different parts of the world together and they do just fine. Most tank raised fish or captive bred fish will do pretty good about a varied range of water parameters. Also consider the temperature of the water. There's tropical fish and then subtropical fish. Most of the fish I've already discussed are going to be tropical fish. They like a temperature of around 72 to 78 degrees, whereas some fish are like a little bit warmer, up to the low to mid 80s, probably not too much higher than about 82. A lot of the African cichlids and stuff like a little bit of higher temperature in the water. And then you have cold water fish. These are going to include goldfish, the white cloud minnows like I have here, hill stream loaches, some of the other loaches. So make sure you know what temperature you're going to need. And if it is a cold water fish, you can eliminate the need for a heater in most cases, as long as your house doesn't get below freezing. I tend to notice that a lot of the Asian fish are going to be generally lower temperature, more so than South American and Africans. Just make sure before you buy any fish to bring home to your aquarium, you've done plenty of research and know what you're getting into. You know that your tank's going to be big enough, you got the right kind of water set up for them, and of course, the nitrogen cycle is all completed and your tank's cycled and ready to house your fish. So once you pick out your fish, you're going to bring them home. You're going to have them in a bag like this. Now, you can't just add them into the aquarium. You have to acclimate them. Now, there's a couple different ways you can acclimate fish. You can do like what I'm doing here, is just a temperature acclimation, where I've been floating them in this aquarium to get the temperature of the water in the bag to pretty close to the same temperature it's in the aquarium. Generally, that's all you need to do. From that point, you can just add them into the aquarium. There's also other ways of doing it. Some people do this every time. With more delicate or more sensitive fish, it might not be a bad idea. That's what we call drip acclimation. All you're going to need for that is a separate container with some water in it and some airline tubing. All you're going to do is take the fish from this bag, empty this bag into the container with the same water. So you're going to create a siphon by sucking the water through the hose and make sure that the end is lower than the level of the water in this aquarium. If you bring it above the level of this, you'll lose the siphon. And the trick here is not to get the water in your mouth. So there, as you can see, I got it dripping. Now that's way too fast for what we need. So once you get that going, just tie a knot in it. It might help to do that first. So now you've got the knot in it, and you just tighten that knot until you get the dripping slowed down. Usually you want about 1 drip per second, maybe a little more, a little less. That's about right. So now with the fish in the container, you're just going to let this sit here and slowly drip the aquarium water into their water. That's going to slowly adjust their water to the parameters of your aquarium water. That way when you add them, there's no change in pH or temperature. It'll be as close as you can get it. Now in my case, and in most cases, that's not really necessary, although it's good to do. There's nothing bad about doing it that way. It's probably the safest way to acclimate fish. But now that these have been sitting in the water, say 15 minutes to a half an hour, we're not going to add this water from the pet store into our aquarium. We don't know what kind of parasites or water parameters or anything that's going on in this water. We want to leave ours clean. So we're going to dump them in a net, and I'll show you how to do that. Now if the people at the pet store have done this right, you should just be able to grab the tag of this bag, pull it, and the rubber band will come off. Now we'll get our net, sort of hang it over the edge of our container there. And we're just going to dump these in. You want to sort of pour the water kind of fast so you don't get any fish stuck in the bag there. Make sure that there's none left in the bag. Now we'll take the fish and we will gently put them in the aquarium. So now let them get sort of acquainted with their new home now. I wouldn't feed right away. They're probably not going to eat. They're still a little stressed from the trip home and new tank, so give them a while to sort of settle in. You'll probably notice they're a lot more pale, or they've lost a lot of color on the trip from the pet store. Give that time. Once they get kind of comfortable, the color will all come back to them. After a few hours, you could feed them and they'll probably eat just fine. If you're doing it the drip acclimation way, same thing with adding the fish. You're going to want to dump the water and the fish into a net and add just the fish, not the water. Even though you've mixed your water with that, you still got the aquarium water from the pet store in here. And it's just good practice not to introduce that into your aquarium. So if this video was helpful for you, give me a like. If you have any questions or comments, leave a comment down below. And subscribe for the next part of this series where we're going to go into maintaining the tank, cleaning, maintenance, stuff like that. So we'll see you then.